Once upon a time in Hollywood, there was a guy named Quentin Tarantino who loved movies and who loved the 60s and Hollywood in that whole time frame. So he did a movie about it. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. We're going to get into it on this episode of Film Fan. This is a complicated one for me because we'll get into it. Let's just talk about it. All right. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood on Film Fan. Next. Welcome to Film Fan, where I discuss all things film related, and my passion for film. If that is also your thing, go ahead and hit the subscribe button there if you haven't already, and that little notification bell so you know when I put up new content. Let's get into it. Last year, 2019, what was it, like July, I think, they released Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Quentin Tarantino's 9th film. This is a rough one for me to talk about because, well, let me back up. When I was doing this channel, when I was first coming up with this channel and thinking of stuff and obviously reviewing movies, I had, friends would ask me, when are you going to do Tarantino movies? And of course I was like, okay, I got to do all of his films, but where do I start? Do I start, chronologically and start with Reservoir Dogs and just go all the way through? Or do I start with my favorites, Django, Inglourious Basterds, Pulp Fiction, Reservoir Dogs? Those are typically my favorites depending on my mood at the time. Or when you ask me, one of those will be number one and whatever. Anyway, so I wasn't quite sure where to start. Then the other day, my wife had the television on and flipping through the channels, and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was actually playing, and she still hasn't seen it. So I was kind of telling her, like, look, you got to watch this film. She's a Leo fan, she's a Brad Pitt fan, and a Tarantino fan, and she hasn't seen it. So I was like, look, you got to watch this film. So I actually put in the 4K Blu-ray, the proper way to watch it, and we had it on. So I figured, you know what? It's his latest film. It's his last film. That's the latest film. It's not his last film, but it's his latest film and most current. So let's get into it. All right. I'll do Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Now, what makes this complicated for me is that it comes down to expectations. I'm going to preface everything by saying it's all about expectations. Now, with a Tarantino film, typically when I see them with a friend or something like that, and, Tarantino fans, and there's this expectation. It's like an event. I saw Hateful Eight as an event. It was like, I think it was Christmas Eve or New Year's. It was around that time. It was like a special event at the IMAX special 70 millimeter projection, theater with an intermission, and they handed out like a book and everything. It was like a big deal. And when I see a Tarantino film or know that a Tarantino film is coming out and you see the trailers, you're just super excited and you're like, okay, you know what you're going to get. You're going to get this like crazy thing that only this guy can do. So that was my expectation going into this. Add to that the fact that based on the trailer, I was expecting this to be a story that revolved around the Manson murders that took place in 1969 on Cielo Drive, where Roman Polanski lived with Sharon Tate, and they were murdered by that Manson clan. I don't know what they're called, Mansonites, whatever, the Manson clan. I'm not a Manson expert, but she got murdered. So I was expecting this to be a film, sort of interwoven story around that with, whatever. But it turns out that that's not even really the case. So without giving too much away, I'll get into kind of what this whole thing is. Leonardo DiCaprio stars as an aging, sort of like washed up television star. He was a star of like a Western kind of show called Bounty Law. And his career is in a decline, and he's starting to realize that, the end is near, and he's kind of going through that mental breakdown period in his life as an actor. And that's pretty much Leonardo DiCaprio's character. Brad Pitt plays Cliff Booth, who is Leo's stunt double, Rick Dalton's stunt double, best friend, and his personal driver, on the account that Rick Dalton lost his license for too many DUIs. So these two guys pal around Hollywood and they're best friends, and you're watching Leonardo DiCaprio just kind of navigate his career moves and what's going to happen next and if he's going to have a career, and you're watching him go through it. It's funny. There's a lot of humor in this film. There's just tons of scenes that are just really hysterical to watch. And Leonardo DiCaprio plays them so well. So does Brad Pitt. The other people in the film, Al Pacino plays Rick Dalton's agent. Kurt Russell's in the film. Bruce Dern, another Tarantino alum is in the film. And there's also a brief performance by the late Luke Perry. He shows up in this film. Probably the standout performance is by a 9-year-old girl named Julia Butters, who steals the whole movie as far as I'm concerned. She's in a scene with Leonardo DiCaprio, and she's this really poised, focused, little, super talented 9-year-old girl. And it just plays really well, and she does a magnificent job in the role. So that's one of the standout performances. Margot Robbie is also in this film. If you've seen the trailers, you see the beautiful blonde Margot Robbie in this film walking around, and that's pretty much all she does in the film is walk around. She plays Sharon Tate. So there's, a sense of, we kind of know Sharon Tate, the history of what happens here, and, she's playing Sharon, and that's really it. So now it's that I've explained to you who's in the film and who's doing what. Now it's time to tell you about the story and the plot and tell you what's what. There is no story. There is no plot. Period. That's it. There's no story. There's no plot. Now, this is where it gets dicey. This is where it gets a little crazy, because is it a great film? No. Is it a good film? Yes. Is it great cinematography? Great performances? Yes. Exceptional. But overall as a film, I've got to give it sort of and I don't do a rating thing here yet. I haven't come up with a rating system, but I definitely want to make it clear that I don't think it warrants that category of great. For example, when I talked about Seven, the first film that I reviewed on this channel was for the movie Seven, which is my favorite movie of all time. And Seven, every possible aspect of the film was fantastic. The story, the screenwriting, the acting, the casting, the editing, cinematography, it's just fantastic. The credits, opening credits, the closing credits. When I talk about a film being great, it has to hit every one of those levels. And this film is a good film. It's a Tarantino movie. It looks good. Robert Richardson, who did cinematography on Hateful Eight, Kill Bill 1 and 2, Inglourious Bastards, he did Django. Yeah. I think those are the films that he did for Tarantino. It looks great. The production design, the way Tarantino makes Hollywood look in the 60s, he captures, it just nails it. It just looks like it was straight out of the 60s. It looks fantastic. It's very well done. It looks fantastic. The performances are great. Like I said, there's all that stuff is there. The Tarantino dialogue, kind of like the way he does things there. The pacing is kind of there. You feel like this is a Tarantino film, but it's missing the element of that wow every scene. If you look at a lot of his films, you look at Pulp Fiction, even though it's this non-linear, non-conventional storytelling technique that Tarantino's pretty much been known for, there's still story there. There's still something going on. There's plots within plots, and the characters kind of interact or wind up crossing paths at some point, and everything kind of just works itself out like a Rubik's Cube, and you're like, whoa. And that's the way his films are. And that was the expectation going into this film. And unfortunately, it wasn't met, because there's just no moments of... wait for it. There's no moments of that rising action and holy shit, oh my God. There are good scenes in the film. I say good scenes. There are good scenes. There are moments that are laughable. Like I said, there's some comedy in this that it's just like, wow. But there's no actual story. You're just watching Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth go around Hollywood, and you're seeing some behind the scenes stuff, and you're getting glimpses at inside jokes of Hollywood and such. But you're never really riveted or feeling like, wow. It just doesn't happen until the end of the film. I'm not going to give any spoilers away. I'm not going to talk much about it. As usual, I'm going to assume you haven't seen this movie. And I know a lot of people who have not seen this film yet. So I'm just going to say that everything comes to a head by the end of the film. So the last act is where it becomes a Tarantino film. And again, that's based on expectation. If you're expecting to see Tarantino-esque like drama and action and such, you're not going to get it until the end of the film. Does not mean it's a bad movie. I saw it in the theater the first time, and when I saw it, looked at my friends looked at me, and was just I literally was just looking for confirmation of whether I was crazy and whether my friends were going to be like, oh my God, that was great. None of us got it. So when it came out on Blu-ray, I watched it again. I knew when I saw it in the theater, I was like, I got to see that again. I got to see that 2 or 3 more times. Maybe I missed something. So I've watched it a few times since, and it's the same thing. It stands on its own as a Tarantino film. It's totally different than his other work. That's what I'm going to say. And that may or may not be to your liking. You're either going to be someone who says, okay, he went a totally different direction. This is kind of just like this visual 3-hour thing. It's like 2 hours and whatever, 2 hours and 80 minutes or whatever. It's almost whatever. No. Did I just say 2 hours and 80 minutes? Yeah. It's about it's almost 3 hours. I think it's 2 hours and 40 minutes. But it's there. It's got Tarantino's stamp on it. it just will leave you a certain way if you had expectations of something else. That's all I can say. I want to reference something just to make that point again. Inglourious Bastards. The opening scene of Inglourious Bastards, where Christoph Waltz's character shows up in France, and he goes to Monsieur Lapidite's estate to question him about hiding Jews that might be there. And that scene alone, just the way he walks in, when the Nazis are seen and the sheet blows in the wind, and you can see them coming up, and you see him walking up into the house, and he sits down and drinks a glass of milk and has this conversation, and it's just, that scene could have ended. And I could have paid for that movie, and that scene could have ended right there, and I'd have been perfectly happy right there. You could just feel that. Same thing with the same movie, Inglourious Bastards, the basement scene where they're in the basement. Don't fat in the basement. That scene alone, another one where you're just like, holy shit, what's going to happen next? There's none of that in this movie except for the last act. The last act, there is a really great scene. It's the best part of the movie, and you will love it if you've not seen it. If you have seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I don't know what else to say. I thought about how complicated this review would be and whether I had to say this or that, but ultimately, it is a good film. It's worth seeing, and it is worth owning. I will even go that far as a collector and someone who just loves, owning, media and such. It's a great film to own, and it will fit nice in your collection. I just think that it hits the bottom of my list. So with my Tarantino films, without going into all the rankings, Jackie Brown and Hateful Eight sit at the bottom of the list. And I think this now has taken that place. This is at the very bottom of the list. Not because it's a bad film, just because it just doesn't do it for me the way the other ones did. So you might go into this and find it to be an ode to 60s Hollywood, and it's visually great, and you get it, and you might totally love it. Like a lot of critics did. I almost felt like an ass when all the critics were like going nuts over this. I felt like, okay, maybe I missed it. Maybe I'm not in on a joke, or maybe I'm not savvy enough to really pick up on what's so great about this film. Maybe when I watch it another time, I'll find it. I don't know, and I'll do another review. But for now, I'll say, see the movie. I will put a link in the description down below where it's currently streaming, where you can pick the Blu-ray, get the Blu-ray. The Blu-ray, by the way, there's several editions of this. Sony put out a special edition, collector's edition. That's got like multiple fold-out things and a vinyl record, like a 45 record, and it's got all these deleted scenes. And Tim Roth was in this movie. His scene was deleted. That seems odd. But there's a lot of stuff on the special edition Blu-ray. And there's a couple of different Blu-ray editions that are floating out there from Target, Best Buy, and Walmart as well. There's like some different special editions, box sets of these. So look for those. Definitely see this movie. I hope this wasn't confusing. I hope I didn't make it sound like a great film or bad film, or I didn't like it. It's just not. Again, everything comes down to expectation. If you're expecting a Tarantino kind of film, you're getting certain elements of it, but a lot of the stuff that you really like, you're not going to get. So that's all I want to say. That's it. All right. As usual, if you like this video, definitely hit that like button. I appreciate that. If you've not subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button and hit that little notification bell so you know when I put up new content. As usual, if you've not seen a movie that's 5 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old, if you've never saw it, it's a brand new movie for you, so you might as well go ahead and see it. Watch a movie, lose yourself in the movies, find yourself in the movies, love the movies, and I'll see you on the next Film Fan.